Within that first year, I put a sticky note on the fridge that I was going to get to 190. And in that time after that, I actually blew up to 236. I was basically living on a bet. I didn't know if this plan would work. I got down to 193 pounds. Felt like I had lost a significant amount of muscle, but research shows that most people that go on some type of fad or crash or yo-yo diet will end up putting 15% more weight. There's a few main things we had discussed that were really eye-opening for me that no one had really mentioned to me before and kind of knew were factors in other people's lives, but no one had been open enough to tell me that at the time. So, all right, everybody, welcome back for another episode. Today we're going to do things a little bit different, and I am going to be solo here, just talking about my journey with weight loss and how I lost over 40 pounds in the span of 6 months. Before I get into anything, I have an ask of you guys. So about 84% of you that listen to this podcast won't like, rate, subscribe, follow it, whatever it might be that you do with your podcast platform. If you could, that would be huge to us. We want to continue to grow the podcast, get bigger guests on, and be able to continue to provide more content. And so the bigger the following gets, the more notoriety we'll get and the better content we can put out for people like you. So if you could, go ahead and just do that real quick. So into my weight loss now, there's a lot about weight loss that people don't understand, and there's a lot of information out there about weight loss. And I wanted to share my story to give background on how simple yet complex weight loss can be. A lot of people struggle with it. A lot of people see things online about it being overly complicated with don't eat this, don't eat that. There's chemical compounds in broccoli that's going to make you fat or ruin your hormonal profile. And then there's people out there saying just count macros and you'll be fine. I'm someone that's always kind of struggled with being a little bit of a more heavy-set person than I'd like to be. And I got to the point of I went from sitting around about 195 pounds back around pre-COVID times. And then around maybe April of 2021, I had started to gain significant weight and was about 210. I remember putting a sticky note on my fridge saying 190, which was my goal weight to get down to. And in that time after that, I actually blew up to 236. Without really trying to. I was still working out 4 or 5 days a week. I was doing cardio. I bought a Peloton. I was eating fairly healthy. I would still go out to eat on the weekends and things, but things didn't work my way for a long time until I got on the right path and figured some things out for myself that I needed to do. And I'm always someone that's needed to work extra hard in the gym and the kitchen to kind of keep my weight at maintenance. So we're really going to go through kind of the process of how things started for me, where I struggled, and then how I kind of came out of that. And at the end, I'll share a few of the key main principles about, why I ended up being able to be successful and how I've maintained that too. Because a lot of people can go on diets and lose a significant amount of weight, but research shows that most people that go on some type of fad or crash or yo-yo diet will end up putting 15% more weight on, I think, the figure is something like that. So we actually end up, after doing fad diets, we'll put more weight on. So I'm about a year out almost from hitting my initial goal of losing 40 pounds. And I've maintained just above that weight, which is actually what I wanted to do. I got to a point where I got down to 193 pounds and felt like I had lost a significant amount of muscle. None of my t-shirts fit anymore. I almost felt too small from the size and mass I had and the strength I had. So I actually wanted to stay right around 200 to 205, which is where I'm sitting right now. So to get into where I think my weight loss or struggles with weight loss started and actually gaining weight, I started having some GI issues back around, actually right before COVID had hit. And I didn't really think anything of it. I figured maybe it was related to stress. Maybe I had some type of food sensitivity to like gluten or dairy that I really didn't want to accept at the time. And that, maybe this would just change and thought things would just go back to normal. Then 2020 happened. I was 2 years into business. My business was kind of at its height. It had been growing. We were successful. Things were getting off the ground. I just hired my first employee and then quickly had to let them go because we didn't know where the world was going to be. And I was trying to do everything in my power to stay afloat, but nothing with COVID was left to our control or to be something that I could really do a lot about. Granted, there was a lot we did in business at the time to make things better and improve systems and everything, but that didn't mean revenue was coming at the time, which was a major stress. At the time, my training felt like garbage. I trained through it, but I started gaining weight. And within that first year, like I said, I put a sticky note on the fridge that I was going to get to 190. And I was probably about 210 at the time. And the scale just kept going up and up. And one of the things I didn't see till later is there was a lot of personal stress that just built up over time. So I had scaled my business drastically. So I went from subleasing space inside of a gym that I did not own and paying very minimal rent to I bought a gym up in Concord, New Hampshire, on top of opening a new gym and moving locations from my original location from Lowell to Tingsboro, Mass. And I was basically living on a bet. I didn't know if this plan would work. It was a bit crazy of me, but there was a lot of opportunity in it. But again, just because there's opportunity, there's no promises that things will work out. And you don't always know what's going to come, and you can't always see things coming. So there was a lot of different things that came at us during that time, during scaling a business, that I was not aware of beforehand, that kind of hit us like a ton of bricks at times. Granted, there's a lot I learned, a lot that came of it. And, finally we got the business to a place where I am able to live more comfortably, not worrying about the business collapsing every day. And, I was working really hard and didn't realize, I didn't feel stressed, but my body was definitely stressed. You sit up at night thinking about this and that before bed. And I was waking up at 6 a.m, getting to the gym by 7 and working till 7:30 at night, getting home at 8:30, not really leaving a lot of downtime for me. And I just remember on the weekends being exhausted. Like Sundays, I just basically wanted to sit on the couch and do nothing. But a lot of times I still had to work. Saturday mornings, I had to be in the gym coaching. And then Sundays, I had a lot of programming to do. I had a lot of athletes at the time that I was programming for. And so I was essentially working 7 days a week, which for most of us isn't the most healthy thing to do. I was also living in an environment where things weren't the most beneficial for me or the most positive for me. I was in a relationship that, although me and my now ex-girlfriend were pretty good, there was a lot in our life that was out of our control. And unfortunately, there was someone else that had control over us and her daughter. So I was also, yes, the role of a step parent for 4 years. And that was a big life shift for me too. And overall, I feel like I didn't have control over my life at the time. Things were not objectively able for me to control or know what was going to happen, because there was essentially, I'm not going to go into grave detail here, but a third party that had a lot of control over what we could and couldn't do. I also had a really hard time separating work and life and being able to balance the two of them out. So granted, I was still new in business. I was just scaling, so it was do or die. But work basically consumed me all day long. So I would be stressed on vacation. I would be stressed about going on vacation because there was a giant opportunity cost there for me to not be working on the business or doing something to generate revenue for the business and things like that. Another thing too, I wasn't really sleeping well at night. I would get home, do some family time and maybe have some personal time, watch some TV, but I just could not unwind at night. So, which makes sense, because if you're working 13-hour days and coming home and you're in the weeds all day, bedtime was my time to sit and actually think about the business and what needed to be done, the next day, the next week, the next quarter, whatever it might be. And yeah, that's typically not the best nighttime routine. So I wasn't shutting down at night either. I was also in the habit of eating late at night. I was trying to be really good during the day and making good decisions. But what I noticed somewhat after the fact is I'd be good during the day. I would be kind of calorically restricted during the day, but I would be so hungry at night, I literally couldn't fall asleep sometimes. I would have to get up at maybe between 10 and 11:30 at night and eat something because my body was just starving. My training wasn't well. I didn't feel energized. My joints always hurt. Something was always hurt. And with all this work stress and everything too, I was very regimented through the week with my eating and my training, and even training on Saturday mornings. But then I would kind of throw in the towel on myself every weekend, where I would go out and I would reward myself for hard weeks of work of, getting the appetizer, a couple extra drinks, a nice big meal. And this didn't really do me so well. And so I continued to have gut health issues. I had gone to my primary care 3 or 4 times for these over the course of 3 years. Actually, it was probably even more than that. And they kept telling me I was fine. My blood work looked fine. There was nothing wrong. I was just stressed. And me being me, having been in this field, having trained hard for 14 years now, I knew something was not quite right. And I didn't really put things together at the time. So I started having rashes all over my skin. I started noticing that coffee was really becoming an irritant. My energy was just changing all the time and kind of going downward. And something just didn't feel right. So I started having some pretty severe GI issues. And then I found a podcast on functional medicine. And I listened to it, and they were talking all about worms, parasites, gut infections, food sensitivities, IBS, et cetera, Crohn's, colitis, all these autoimmune disorders. And a lot of it really resonated with me. So I kind of went down this rabbit hole of looking into functional medicine and what they do and how they treat, and figured that, hey, my primary care isn't listening to me. I've tried some things on my own, and I tried eliminating dairy. I tried eliminating gluten. I tried all these different things that might have worked for a little bit. Maybe it was a little bit placebo because it was just a new change, but everything kept just coming back. So I finally found a functional medicine doctor. Her name is Dr. Zub. She's down in Hopkinton, Massachusetts at For Better Health. She's co-owner, and she was amazing. So I went there. My first evaluation was 2 hours long, and we literally went through everything in my life, from antibiotic use in the past to what my childhood was like, what my relationship at home is like, what my relationship with work is like, going through my history battling chronic disease with ankylosing spondylitis, which is an autoimmune disorder that falls under the family of rheumatoid conditions. And there was a few main things we had discussed that came of this that were really eye-opening for me, that no one had really mentioned to me before. And I kind of knew, were factors in other people's lives, but no one had been open enough to tell me that at the time. So first things first, we discussed I need to do a stool sample. And so she said, it sounds like you have some genuine dysbiosis of your gut going on. There's probably something off with your bacteria. You could have a parasitic infection. And so I was like, yeah, sign me up. My dog gets a stool sample every year, and they test him for parasites and worms and all this. Humans can contract them too, but why did no one else want to do this? I don't know. So we did the stool sample, and it turns out that I did, in fact, have a parasite that was living inside me, probably for the past 2.5 to 3 years that I had been dealing with all these issues, which is why most of these things probably or partially came up. And then on top of that, another big thing for me was she had me take what's called an ACE test. So the ACE test, for those of you that don't know, is the Adverse Childhood Event Score test. So this is just a basic questionnaire that goes through your childhood, and it's a yes, no. Did this happen to you or not? And it's 10 questions, and I scored a 7 out of 10. So growing up, I had lived with and had an alcoholic mother, and I never considered my life to be all that bad. I luckily had a great father, and still do have a great father, that took care of me and did everything he could to make sure I had the best care growing up. But unfortunately, there's still things that happen when you're living with someone that has a disease like alcoholism. And so she looked at the paper, turned it to me, and said, do you think this has anything to do with your current situation? She goes, you grew up in a very stressful environment where you learned how to very well cope with stress. However, sounds like you're constantly adding more to your plate with work, competing, your relationship, working out, coaching, adding locations. And that really hit me hard. She's like, you want before, or while we treat all this parasite and this severe gut dysbiosis, And with the gut dysbiosis too, my bacterial profile. So for those that don't know, your gut is filled with different types of bacteria. And this bacteria should be in a balance of, I'm not going to get into the science of it really, but you have different types of bacteria that should all kind of be balanced out, almost like a pH of acid and alkalinity would with water or any chemical compound. Your gut should be filled with different types of phosphates and methylates, I believe. I could be saying that wrong. It's not coming to mind right now. But yeah, so she said, while we treat all these things, we also you need to address your past and learn why you are the way you are, why you like to deal with stress the way you like to deal with it, and that I should really just go see someone and talk to someone and do talk therapy and maybe even some Reiki and energy healing type things to work some of these things out. And some of that might sound kind of voodoo, but I think a lot of it is true. And so I wouldn't say I ever had symptoms of clinical depression or anxiety, but life was feeling quite gloomy for a bit. I was always tired. I didn't want to really do anything on the weekends. My emotional battery was just kind of completely dead. I didn't even want to, I've always been much of an extroverted person that really valued hanging out with my friends and family, and I was almost just too tired to do so. I also noticed I was becoming more moody. At work, some small thing would happen and I'd get easily overly frustrated. And as I said, I was starting to get rashes all over my skin. Like my deodorant was bugging me. My clothes were bothering me. Every type of detergent was bugging my skin. We also did some more testing too with my blood panels, and my hormones were completely out of whack. And the scale kept going up, and I basically had lost my motivation to train, which was completely unlike me because I've done this for 14 years. I've seen it as a way of life for me. It's something that mentally I've always kind of needed, but things weren't going my way at the time, and it just didn't make sense to continue to beat myself up in the gym when nothing good was coming of it. So at the time, though, mentally, I felt I was pretty clear on things, and I was still able to work well, and I was still motivated to get work done, and I was still building a business, and we had lots going on. And essentially, though, I had a gun to my head of, if this failed, I didn't know what my life would look like. I put all my money into this, all my time. At this point, I didn't have any thought of going to work for someone else was going to be an option. I didn't want to work for anyone else at this point. I fully committed to the route of being an entrepreneur. So yeah, now what I have realized is I might have mentally been pretty clear, but my body was dealing with stress in a different way, where I was just pushing things down. And there's books on this. The Body Keeps the Score. And there's a great book called The Body Keeps the Score that discusses all the things we do to ourselves, whether it be in these little microcosms or what have you, that really just start to add up over time. And for me at this point, I had really pushed things over the edge. So going through treatment, so I had to go on an anti-protozoal treatment, which basically was supposed to rid my body of the parasite. It was a pretty brutal 10 days where I basically felt like I was, as if you've ever had hives and how itchy you are. I had that for 10 days where that was my body actually getting rid of the parasite. It wasn't an allergic reaction or anything, but I wanted to rip my hair out of my head. My scalp was super itchy. My skin was itchy all over. I was super tired, yet I had seen very quickly positive impacts on my GI symptoms and what we'll call irritable bowel syndrome symptoms. And then we also put me on a very, very specific probiotic treatment. So this is one thing I want to discuss a little bit, is so many people go on probiotics and it's just, we go to CVS, whatever, the grocery store, and we buy these cheap probiotics that are just this umbrella. So the thing I learned through going through functional medicine is that these blanket supplements might actually be causing you more harm than good. So if you're on probiotics and you don't feel a difference within the first month or so, it might not be the one for you, because again, we have a bacterial profile that should be in balance. And if we're just throwing one type or certain types at it, it can continue to downwardly cascade into something that is making your actual condition worse, not better. So if you're having GI issues and things, functional medicine is huge because, and such a huge proponent of it, because it's the only thing that's been able to help me and help a lot of others that are having all these issues with gut health. And there's so much that comes from gut health. Our brain health is related to our gut and how our gut is optimized or functioning. And there's so many things that go into testing it. When I went, I think we pulled like 26 vials of blood. The phlebotomist at the testing center was like, holy shit, I've never seen so much blood get drawn before. And I was like, good. So when I went into treatment, my doctor, Dr. Zub, was like a sniper. She knew exactly what was going on and exactly what we needed to target, what I needed to do, and also what I didn't need to do, which is huge because making changes is very hard, and having a targeted approach is super important because it's a lot to change your diet, to buy all these new supplements, to cope with understanding what's going on, and to be able to eliminate the unnecessary things and know that, or have a greater understanding of this is likely going to work versus, hey, a lot of times I hear people go to the doctors and it's, we're going to try this, we're going to try that. That didn't work either. We're going to try this. And it's like, we're throwing things at the wall and seeing what sticks. Instead, this was much more targeted to, we're going to do this, and then we're going to do this, and then we're going to do this. And this is what your 3 phases of treatment should look like. If all goes according to plan and you are actively participating in the process and adhering to the process. So part of that, I also was told, I did food sensitivity testing as well. Sorry, my voice is going raspy already. So we did food sensitivity testing, and that showed that I was sensitive, not allergic, but sensitive to dairy, eggs, and gluten at the time. So for people out there, there is a huge difference between being allergic to something and having a food sensitivity to something. So with an allergy, that is going to be a quick, somewhat severe, acute reaction. So if you're allergic to a food, your lips might get puffy, your throat might get sore or raspy. It might be hard to breathe. You might be going into anaphylaxis. You could break out in hives, things like that. With a food sensitivity, things don't work quite that way. So with a food sensitivity, there is a different Ig protein, I believe it's IgE, that gets spiked. And when that spikes, it is a longer, slower curve of severity. So typically when you have a food sensitivity, you might not notice issues until 2 or 3 days later, which makes things very hard to track and figure out what's going on. Like, I have a friend that is lactose intolerant and he will still eat milk. And you know he's lactose intolerant because within 30 minutes, he has to run to the bathroom, maybe multiple times, and probably won't have a fun time getting home. With food sensitivities, these are more accumulated issues that will be an issue over time. So maybe you can get away with a small amount of gluten, dairy, eggs, or whatever. But when you're eating them every day, they're building up, and it also can take a while to lose those symptoms. So it makes tracking and figuring things out very hard. So what Dr. Zeb told me was the biggest issues people have with food sensitivities are typically gluten, dairy, and eggs. So we eliminated all of them. I told her, well, I had tried, eliminating gluten and eliminating dairy separately. And she was like, well, if you're sitting on 40 tacks and you only eliminate 20, you're still sitting on 20 tacks and your body's still going to hurt from it. So I went and eliminated them all. And this became a very calorically restricted diet where I was basically eating meat, certain vegetables, and basically rice. Because I even found that certain vegetables, so broccoli, asparagus, cauliflower, all those cruciferous vegetables were also giving me increased symptoms. And then I also found too that coffee was not my friend anymore. And that coffee was significantly irritating my gut. So even when eliminating those things, I was getting better, but still not 100%. So these things took quite a long time. I was better and happy with where I was, but I was still having intermittent symptoms a few times a week, better than every day, but still not where I wanted to be. I started going to therapy and learned that I was in fight or flight response the majority of my day. I didn't have a shutdown routine. I didn't ever shut off of work. I was There was plenty of times I was told I was talking about work in my sleep, dreaming of work all the time. I even remember sometimes like waking up in some stupor and telling people how to do box jumps better, or that nobody talked to me. This person's about to hit a PR, and that I was coaching at a competition. I also didn't really give myself any time to shut off, and I wasn't really doing anything for myself that wasn't driven by the sympathetic nervous system. So my idea of shutting down was, or turning off, was playing drums, mountain biking, running, lifting. These are things that are just further driving you into a state of sympathetic drive, which can be fun, it can be exciting, it can be rewarding, but my nervous system is just still in this vibrational mode all day that isn't giving it time to rest, digest, let the cortisol come down and regulate. So probably a big reason why my hormonal profile was so off too. So from there, I started working with a new coaching group, and we did more testing. And so I had gotten to the point of, I'd started to lose some weight, but I had still, through all this elimination diet and everything, I was still gaining weight. So I went with a new group. They had a different approach, and this was basically targeted to entrepreneurs. They're a medical group that works with entrepreneurs on regaining your work-life balance, having a better association with your family, your own routines, things like that. And so we did more stool samples, found that I had very much improved my gut health. So I went from a 9 dysbiosis to a 3 out of 10 dysbiosis, and my parasite was actually still gone, which sometimes parasites can come back. And so we did more testing, and so we did adrenal testing at that time. So we found my cortisol was basically functioning backwards. So where it should peak in the morning, mine was actually basically dead in the morning and peaking at night. And then we established that we did genetic testing as well. So we went through all these genetic factors and testing, and two of the big things that came out of that, so there was like over 100 different genes that were tested for, maybe even 200, I forget. But two of the big things that came out of it were, I basically rolled snake eyes with my genetic profile, where I have a cardiac gene and a metabolic gene. So one of the genes, so the cardiac gene basically determines that in order for me to turn on my fat metabolism and lose weight, I need to do a significant amount of cardio a week. So what that meant for me was between an hour and an hour and a half a week, not per day, per week, of cardio, which was not the funnest thing for me to hear. I've never really enjoyed cardio all that much. I'll do some sprints here and there. I play hockey. That's fun, but that's once a week. Never was really into steady state cardio or, consistently doing high intensity interval training. I also had a metabolic gene that said I need to be at about 20% more of a caloric deficit than any other person that's prescribed for weight loss. So if the typical person was prescribed a 2,500 calorie diet to lose weight, even for my size, if 2,500 calories was my baseline, if I'm doing my mental math right here, I would have to be at 2,000 calories per day to lose weight. So as much as these two things suck, that I had to basically shut my mouth, stop eating, and start running, it actually made sense. Now, I'd done the regular dieting. I'd gone down to 2,000 calories of a deficit and tracked significantly over time, and nothing was changing. I had added a lot of cardio in, and nothing was changing. But I kind of did these things separately. I tried reverse dieting because everyone told me I was not eating enough. Even the professionals were like, for your size, how much you work out, your activity level, your training status, you should be consuming more calories. So I went from 2,000 calories and slowly titrated up to 3,000 calories. And the scale just continued to go up. After 3,000, I went back down to 2,000. Nothing happened. Well, it turns out with my genetic profile, I was still overshooting by about 20%. So we put me in a caloric deficit. We reduced my calories by 20%. We added 2 days of cardio in, and magically, weight started coming off. Now, mind you, at this time too, the other piece of that is I had left what I realized after the fact was a very stressful relationship. I was at the time wearing a Whoop, which is a fitness wearable. And every day for the first month, the Whoop would tell me I was spending 3 less hours a day in the high stress zone. That is very significant, right? To leave something, not sure if you made the right choice, if this is what you need. It wasn't something I want to do, but something I felt I needed to do. To leave and objectively have is a metric that is telling you every day you're spending 3 less hours a day in the high stress zone says something about the state my body was in physically. So adding a new environment, less negative vibrations all day, and knowing about these 2 genes, I started doing more cardio. And cardio really, people ask too, because I went from not being able to run on a treadmill for even 3 minutes at a time. Like I was dead. I was hurting basically. It was hard. I did not want to do it. To I actually just this past June ran a half marathon, and I ended up doing a weightlifting competition this past November as well. So these were big things for me to change my environment, have new understanding of what my body actually needed, and put a plan in place. So I started working within this coaching group I was in, or medical group. I worked bi-weekly with a dietitian. So that dietitian, Amanda, was great because not only did we just talk about my, eating and diet, but what my routine looked like. So we established that I needed a shutdown routine. So I would be logging off work by 8 p.m. I would set aside time for meditation and me time, and then also some family time. I would use blue light glasses, and I recently found out too that I have ADHD, and that actually listening to a podcast at night helps me not let my brain wander. And I actually got to sleep faster by listening to a podcast of some type of light listening. I also really like true crime, and murder mysteries are something that really put me right to bed for some reason. I don't know why. Think what you want of me, but that's the case for me. So we started slowly with running, and I think that was the biggest thing. We started with me doing 3-minute intervals 3 times. So I was doing 10 minutes of cardio to start, and just slowly adding 1 rep of that 3-minute interval throughout the week. Getting into running was very simple for me. At least I viewed it as very simple. I would do that 2 days a week, and then within those 2 days, I would just add another repetition until I got to about 15 minutes. I was like, hey, let me try to do 5 minutes continuous. Let me do 7 minutes. Let me do 10. Let me do 15. If I can do 15, I could probably do 20. I got to 20. I was like, well, if I could do 20, I can do 30. I started doing 30 consistently, and that's where I started to really notice a difference. On top of, I also was doing short 10-minute bouts of either Tabata sprints on the bike, or 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off, something like that, maybe some sled pushes. So I worked up to doing 2 steady state, low intensity days, and then 2 days of quick, high intensity interval training. On top of that, in order for me to fit my calories in and not go to bed starving, I chose to do intermittent fasting. So I did the 16 and 8 window. So I would eat for 8 hours of the day and fast for 16 hours of the day. And I still currently have continued to do this. I just find it works really well for me. So there's a lot of stuff, I will call it, out there about the intermittent fasting, and that it's stupid, it doesn't work, it doesn't make any difference. The fact of the matter is, scientifically, if you want to lose weight, we need to be in a caloric deficit. So for me, the hard part was finding that level of caloric deficit, because it was outside of the normal expectation for most people. And so for me, I was someone that I can't go to bed hungry, but I could get up in the morning. Breakfast is a chore for me. I like to wake up. I like to get right to work. It was less time for me to spend during the day worrying about food prepping and eating and taking away from work. So I chose to do intermittent fasting, not because it had any better benefits of weight loss. It's because it's a solution that worked for me, where I could eat the amount of calories my body needed and also be able to live my life the way I wanted to be more productive, and also not go to bed hungry, and still get the nutrition that I needed and still be able to lose weight. Because the other thing too is, I'm typically not that hungry in the morning, and I might get, especially in the beginning, I would get hunger signals for maybe 15 minutes. I would drink some water, and they would typically go away. So those were some big pieces to that for me. Another part of my testing that we found within my genetic testing is I have the MTFHR gene, which is still newly being studied, but something we've started to find out that a significant amount of people have this gene where we don't metabolize B vitamins very well in the synthetic form. So we actually need to consume pre-methylated B vitamins. So there are plenty of supplements out there where you can get pre-methylated B vitamins, which can make a huge difference. So if you are low on energy, you have some type of like nervy sensation and things, trying the pre-methylated vitamins. I'm not a doctor. I don't completely know, but I don't think consuming the pre-methylated version would be of any issue. So if you're having issues with them or you're not feeling a difference, you can always try to do a pre-methylated version of it. And I've noticed a big difference if I was taking regular B vitamins for a long time, but once we did this genetic testing and we switched me to a pre-methylated one, I noticed huge improvements in my energy, my cognition, my focus. So that made a big difference for me. The other big thing for me was the change of environment. So I had noticed previously, so when in a relationship, every time I traveled and got away from the stressful environment I was in, my heart rate variability, which is, and I have a whole podcast on this called Stress and HRV, but there is a whole lot of data supporting that HRV is a key performance indicator to our health. And I have a whole podcast discussing why this is. And typically when you travel, you're at altitude, you're hypoxic for 3 to 4 hours in the air, you're waking up early, your sleep's off, everything else, you typically dehydrate faster when you're in the air. And I don't like to drink water on a plane because I'm busy working and don't want to have to go to the bathroom a million times. So even doing all these things that are against typical health, my HRV was dramatically spiking higher, which is a good thing. The higher the HRV you have, the better. So I started noting these environmental changes. And when I then left that relationship and moved in to a new home and everything, I saw these same objective changes happen. And just being in a different environment took away some of the negative things that I was focused on throughout the day. And I was just able to focus a little bit more on myself, which made things much easier to lose weight in my mind because, my body wasn't trying so hard to do so many different things and just stay alive. It could focus on some other things that I was trying to do without actually really even trying, if that makes any sense. And even my operations manager, Anthony, it was maybe a month or two after I had left this relationship where I came in one day and he just laughed and I was like, what? And he's like, the weight is just like now just melting off of you completely. And I was like, yeah, it kind of is. And it got much easier for a while. And the other thing I did too is, so working with this dietitian, I stopped tracking macros. Now, macros can be very beneficial to a lot of people. I still believe in them. They work for sure. Science says they work. And I'm still very supportive of it. And even if you're not going to track every day, you should have some type of understanding of where you're at. So, because things that get measured get managed. So just like if you were struggling with your finances and you said, hey, I need to do something, and you start go look at your bank statement and realize where you're spending money, maybe in the wrong places, and you start to, make changes to that, you're going to see improvements in your bank account, much like you will with your diet. So I had started working with this dietitian. We put together a plan for me of making sure I was getting enough protein, enough carbohydrate, enough fats, enough antioxidants, and enough fiber. Those were the big things. So antioxidants for me, my diet is just generally low in them. So I supplemented antioxidants, make sure I got enough protein, make sure I got enough carbs and fat, and then that my vitamins were of the right type, and that I was getting enough fiber. So those were big pieces to me, but we kind of planned things out and said, okay, if you have, and so for me that was doing intermittent fasting was fairly easy, where it was, I can have a lunch with 8 ounces of some type of protein, right? And so the fat content and protein content is always going to be a little bit different between something like a salmon versus a chicken. And so, but in the grand scheme of on a weekly basis, we're looking at this at, right? It's not that much of a difference that's going to create significant change. So it was, let's do 8 ounces of a protein. Let's do a cup of some type of grain, whether it be rice, a potato, something like that, and then a cup of vegetables. So I planned out that that was going to be my lunch and dinner, some different array of those. And then I would fit some snacks in through the day as well. So sometimes it's overnight oats with some protein powder, some type of dairy-free yogurt alternative for me, sometimes some additional meat to get some extra protein, and making sure I was getting some extra vegetables and things in as well. So this, on top of the other piece I did too, was I hired a meal prep company. So for those that are local that are maybe gym members, I use Fork Included in Lowell, Massachusetts. They are a mom and pop company and they customize everything for you. So I told them what I wanted of, and they deliver my containers in glass. So I'm not getting the issues with like microwaving plastics and things and some of the things that can come of that and hormonal disruption. And they only cook with olive oil or coconut oil. And so I'm not getting any of the unnecessary polyunsaturated fats, things like that. So what this did for me is it was preset. They work with me on, what my dietary preferences were, and really just made things work because things were predetermined. They had a menu I would select from it at the beginning of the week. And I just ended up kind of getting what I got. And that was my meal for the day. And on top of that, I would go to the grocery store, buy the snacks and things I needed to, be supportive of my diet. And that was really it. For a long time, I really didn't have, and I was busy with moving and getting settled and things. I didn't really buy any snacks at the grocery store. I was just eating these meals and my few snacks for the day and just being really consistent with that. And not having snacks in the house definitely made it easier because there were certain nights, especially in the beginning, you're changing your diet and things, you're hungry, but I was living up in the boonies of New Hampshire at the time. And it wasn't really an option to just go run to the store or something and get something because I was hungry. You just learn to deal with it. And then within the first few weeks, actually, it became very easy to adapt to, and I wasn't getting hungry at night anymore, and it wasn't keeping me up at night, or at least what I thought was keeping me up at night. And another thing I started to do was I stopped eating after 7:30 at night. So I would get home around 7:30 and eat, and that would be my last meal of the day. So what they adhered to and wanted me to adhere to was the 3-hour rule. So this was another big component for me of there is a lot I learned that happens. So there is a lot out there that says you can eat whatever you want in the day. It doesn't matter. Get your calories in, yada, yada. But there actually is some significant evidence to support that eating within 3 hours before bed does a lot to your blood sugar, your insulin, your fat metabolism, and can really, wreak havoc on trying to lose weight and impede your progress there. So stopping eating 3 hours before bed, it definitely works for me because even now I notice if there's weeks I go, and now that I'm in maintenance, I'm less thorough on this one because sometimes I do have a busy day and I don't get enough food in now and I will want to eat something before bed. But I definitely notice when I get in those grooves for a while, I definitely don't see the progress I will see when I'm limiting my food at least 3 hours before bed. Another thing that was big for me was removing the cruciferous vegetables, which everyone thinks broccoli is great and you should be able to eat all the vegetables without any issues. But for a lot of people, especially now with whatever they're putting on foods as preservatives and GMOs, and I don't know, people aren't really good at digesting some of these vegetables like broccoli, asparagus, any of the cruciferous type vegetables. So typically the ones that just seem very fibrous and what would be hard to bite into uncooked, they're hard for your body to digest. And so they're not always that friendly, especially if you have certain gut things going on. So that was actually another thing I forgot to mention is I basically stuck to low FODMAP foods. So I forget the abbreviation for FODMAPs, but FODMAPs, fermentable oligosaccharide, disaccharide, monosaccharide, and polyols are short-chain carbohydrates that are difficult for the small intestine to absorb and ferment in the colon. So I had eliminated a lot of those vegetables because they were making it hard to digest. And when your gut is irritated and it can't do its thing and it's inflamed, you're not going to get other nutrients and phytonutrients and micronutrients and all that either. So I had eliminated those and just started eating more of the softer, easily digestible vegetables. And on top of that, if I was going to have a cruciferous vegetable, like if I went out to eat and that was the only option, I would ask them to overcook them so they were easier to digest, because the more you cook it, the more it is broken down into a more digestible format. And I removed caffeine as well. So this was a big one for me, of learning that my adrenals were all over the place and everything was basically backwards. And I am a huge coffee addict. I was at the point of drinking 3 coffees a day, which probably didn't help anything at all. It kind of kept me awake through the day. But once I removed that, I saw a very big improvement in my symptoms. And it was also not overly stimulating my CNS. So I already had so much stress going on with work and having basically gun to my head to make things work. Once I eliminated coffee, I think my body was able to start to relax a little bit more. I noticed I was less anxious. I wasn't so jittery and overly stimulated. Another thing that really worked well for me too is I added more soluble fiber. So soluble fiber comes in the form of apples, bananas, pears, avocados actually have a fair amount of soluble fiber, peas, Brussels sprouts. Those were big ones. And then psyllium husk was another supplement I added in to help with staying full and satiated. So that was a kind of a hack I had at night when I was having issues with nighttime hunger. What I started doing is I would have my meal and then I would take the psyllium husk maybe an hour or so before bed, which really kept me satiated and still does. I still use that. It also helps with insulin sensitivity and blood glucose control, as well as can help improve cholesterol levels. So it can be a really good supplement. The only thing you need to watch out for, if you consider taking this, maybe talk to your doctor, it can interfere with the utilization and absorption of certain medications. So if you're going to take it, I would say take it not with the medications you're going to take. So if you have to take medication at night before bed, I'll try to spread that out by maybe a few hours. I'm not the expert on that, so you should consult someone else on that. And another thing I started doing, which seemed to really help me, again, I have an autoimmune condition, so this helped in that way too. I think it just helped my body move better and train with a little bit more juju, is I started doing an ice bath every day. So I moved in with a friend for a period of time. He had an ice bath at his house. I started getting up every day around between 6 and 7, and jumping in 39-degree water at 3 minutes. There's a lot of things about ice baths going back and forth right now. Data to support it, data not supporting it, saying don't torture yourself. There's also some research saying it helps improve the metabolism of brown fat, which is a certain type of fat, which is typically the harder type of fat to burn. So once I started doing this, I think it was part of a routine for me. I got up in the morning. It was a hard thing to do, but once you did it, you felt satisfied. You felt that you could just take on the day. It also definitely, you can't argue with the fact that it definitely fucking wakes you up. You will feel some energy from that for quite a few hours after that. So I think just having a better morning routine to get me ready for the workday also improved, because that time when you're trying not to freeze to death, you actually have to kind of go inward, and it actually becomes quite meditative of you're not really focused on anything else. And for me, having so many things to think about with running a business and having ADHD, this is a forced time where my body wasn't thinking about anything else. And for me, that 3 minutes of forced breath work in a ice cold tub definitely helped set me up for success. And so I had been losing a lot of weight. So I was down about probably 30 pounds or so. I had about another 10 to go to get to my goal weight my new goal weight had been 195. And why 195? I figured 190 coming from 236 was a bit unrealistic. So I used to, at the time, compete as an 89 kilo Olympic weightlifter. And so my goal was to get back to my old weight class. And I knew if I signed up for a meet. So at this point, when I had decided to sign up for this meet, my training was feeling better. I was moving better. I wasn't having so many aches and pains. I had the time to focus on this. But at the time, the weight loss started to become harder, right? So I dropped about 25, 30 pounds at this point, and I just realized that the weight wasn't coming off so easy anymore, which it shouldn't. Your body goes into homeostasis. So I knew. And then my personal life was kind of getting back into balance, and I was spending more social time with friends and things, maybe making less good decisions. So I signed up for this and said, okay, this is going to motivate me to stay consistent again and be more disciplined. So for me, motivation definitely comes, or discipline comes with motivation. And not that it always has to, but for me, that was my anchor. So that got me to get to my goal weight. So I actually ended up getting all the way down to, I think the day of the meet, I weighed in at 191. Now, there was some water manipulation and sodium manipulation in there, but really after that meet, I was still walking around about 194 for a period of time. Now, I also realized too that by the time I got to 195, losing 40 pounds in less than 6 months. So this went from June, I started losing weight, to November, I think it was 11th, I competed last year. When you lose that much weight in such a short period of time, it's not sustainable to continue to do that. And there are negative implications for losing that much weight that quick. So that was one of my concerns through all this, is that I was going to be fucking my metabolism up by staying down at that weight. So I actually planned on, after that meet, putting a few more pounds back on, because I was only eating like 17 or 1800 calories a day. And when you get to a certain point and your long-term caloric intake stays the same, your body actually becomes more efficient. So this is really important for everyone to know. We don't want to actually be metabolically efficient. We want to be almost the opposite of the fuel economy of your car. So I want to be able to eat 5,000 calories and only utilize 2,500 and be able to excrete the rest. If you're only feeding, if you go from 5,000 to now 2,000, the efficiency rating of your body actually goes up and will actually start to take a higher and higher percentage of fats, carbohydrates, and store all of them. So I want to make sure I wasn't stuck at this weight where my metabolism adapts, because what happens with adaptation, as far as we know, and my understanding goes, is that once you have this new higher efficiency rating, when you add calories back in, especially acutely, you keep that efficiency rating. So you're actually utilizing and storing more calories than you were prior to going into a long-term deficit. So I want to get out of that. So I put a few pounds back on. So I upped my calories again to just kind of get in maintenance, and I wanted to reverse diet and see what I could do to reverse diet and see how high I could get my calories while really only gaining maybe 2 to 3 pounds. And I was able to successfully do that for a while until I signed up for a half marathon. So I had done that weightlifting meet, and then I kind of just got burnt out from training. I had been working a lot still, and just 14 years in a gym, 3 years in a new gym where I was literally there 6 days a week. I just kind of lost the mojo to be training heavy all the time and just needed to change of pace for a little bit. So with the progress I had seen from running 30 minutes a day, and I was getting faster, I was like, okay, I started kind of casually going for runs as part of my weekly routine. And one day, love you, Dad, but I'm going to throw you under the bus here. I was in Florida with my family for Christmas, and I was hungover as hell, but was like, I need to get out and go for a run. My dad said, however long you go, just give me a call. I'll come pick you up. So I ended up running 4 miles, called him. He's like, oh, we went out to lunch, and yeah, call me when you get back to the house and get showered, and I'll come pick you up. And I said, I wasn't going to argue with him. I just accepted and said, well, I guess this is going to force me to run 8 miles today hungover. So I did that at about a 9:30 or so pace and realized, well, if I can do this hungover, I should be able to run a half marathon. So I started training for a half marathon. So I was training 3 days a week moderately, maybe a fourth day, depending on what my week and schedule looked like. I upped my running from 2 days a week of low intensity, steady state to competitively running hard 2 days a week, with another 1 to 2 days a week of pretty moderate runs. And I was getting faster cardiovascularly. I was getting in much better shape, continued to see progress every week. So I went from, in 14 weeks, I went from thinking or having a goal of just completing a half marathon without stopping or walking to maybe I can do sub 9. Oh, I can do sub 9 to I can maybe do sub 8:30 to, oh, I can definitely run sub 8:30 pace to, I think I can actually maybe do a sub 8-minute mile average pace. So I continued to get faster, but I actually was putting weight back on. So I went from about 200 pounds pre-marathon training to about 210 pounds the day of my race. I think the day of my race I actually weighed in at like 212 with the carbo loading and everything. So what I realized from this and what everyone needs to hear is running is not the only way to lose weight, and it's not always the healthiest way to lose weight or the best way to lose weight. It is one modality or one way to burn calories, but you still have to eat right. So for me, running is actually very strenuous. I'm not a runner. I'm not built like a runner. I don't have the genetic testing I did. I do not have the cardiovascular gene. I have the strength gene, which makes sense that I own a gym. But that being said, I had to eat to perform. And I think too, the hormonal profile shifts when you're going into something like running. And my body really wanted to just hold on to weight and mass. And once I did my half marathon that I will probably never do again, it was a great learning experience. I got to know a lot about what running is like, and I treat a lot of runners as a physical therapist. So I decided that running only casually is for me. So I might do some 5 and 10Ks in the future here, but I'm back to doing 2 times a week, low intensity, steady state cardio for maybe 20 minutes on the bike. And I haven't even really done any high intensity interval stuff all that often, maybe once a week right now. And just going back to increasing the volume of my strength training, which is what I actually enjoy the most. And my weight came back down. I'm back down to 200 pounds as of this morning, actually. So within 2 months of not even really trying, just changing my routine a little bit, I dropped like 10 to 12 pounds by not doing as much cardio, which some people don't want to hear or don't want to know or realize. And it feels good to run. It's a hard thing to do when you feel rewarded after, you feel satisfied after, because you did something hard. But doing something hard doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be beneficial for you. So those are things to keep in mind. So as of today, I had hit my goal weight last November. We're heading into September, so about 10 months out, I guess, from losing that weight, and I have successfully stayed here. Now, currently in maintenance, what am I doing? I'm still strength training. That never changed for me. Still doing that. I'm still doing the meal prep. So I actually found out too, and people might not realize this. When I go to the grocery store, my eyes are always bigger than my belly, and I'm like, oh, I need all this meat and all these carbs and all these vegetables and everything. And I end up throwing half of it away because I don't need that much food. Maybe I just need to measure things better and do some math in my head. But I actually save money now. I tracked it, and I save money by getting the meals prepped and cooked for me and delivered and all that, because I'm not throwing food away. And I'm also saving time I can save time. I don't have to cook. I don't have to clean up after myself. I always make a mess when I cook, so I don't have to do any of that. And it's really made life that much easier for me to take time to do the things that I find rewarding. Like now I have time, instead of having to come home and cook every night, I can go in my basement and play drums. And that's something I really love to do. I can spend extra time at the gym if I wanted to, or extra time getting some work done, or spending time with family and friends. That's one less work I have to do. And I don't have to go to the grocery store as often either, which is great because I hate the grocery store. So I now will only really go to the grocery store once every other week to get the snacks I need. And that makes life 10 times easier for me, because the grocery store literally just drains me of my energy. And as an entrepreneur, you have to do your best to preserve your energy for the things that really matter the most to you. So getting rid of the things that didn't matter to me and was sucking me of my energy is something you need to learn as a business owner, that I took and utilized in my personal life as well to do these things. And so with that, another thing too is I still don't really get a lot of snacks. So how I'm currently maintaining, and just some principles for you guys. So just kind of as a recap of the take home message here is, We should probably be doing some cardiovascular exercise a few times a week anyways for cardiovascular health. And it might help with your weight, your fat loss and fat metabolism. We need to be strength training. Muscle is metabolically more active. So when we are strength training, we're going to burn calories for a lot longer period of time, and we're going to up our metabolic rate by having more muscle. That's why you see big muscular guys that can eat 4,000 calories a day, or even women sometimes that can eat 4,000 calories a day and not look fat or look like they have an ounce of body fat, because they are just metabolically very active. Granted, there are people on steroids that are cheating the system and things, and you need to know who's natural and who's not, because that's not going to give us a realistic idea of what is what. But for the most part, or not for the most part, for everyone, the more muscle you have, the more metabolically active you will be, which means you'll burn more calories through the day. So strength training is huge for that. And it doesn't mean you're going to get jacked and have all these traps busting out of your neck that women tend to still be scared of sometimes. We need to strength train for fat metabolism. High intensity interval training is also another great, short, quick, easy way to burn fat. So I still try to get that in regularly, and also just helps with feeling athletic and healthy and explosive. Like I said, I still get my meals prepped. It's just another equation and another thing I don't have to think about, where I can put my focus elsewhere. And when these meals get delivered, that's just what I'm eating for the night. I don't really have an option. So it keeps things consistent for me in that sense. I will buy some small snacks for my house now. I'm a single guy. It's only me here, so it's pretty easy. I know some of you will throw stones at me for this. Like, well, I have kids and this and that. I understand. But if you can cut down on the ones that are there, or maybe buy the ones, intentionally when you go to the grocery store, if Cheez-Its are your favorite thing, maybe not buy the Cheez-Its and buy something else that you're less likely to go for every day, right? And I will purposely just buy enough to get me through a week, so I have to ration it. And I still go out to eat regularly now too. The thing I changed is, which has made a big difference for me, is before I go out to eat, I will look at the menu and choose what I'm going to select before I get there. For me, and I think for plenty of others too, there is something to being at home, knowing you're going to go out to eat, knowing there's bad decisions that could be made, and being in the right mindset of, I'm in my home, I have these goals, I've been working towards these goals. Let's make the rational, intelligent decision here of, I can still have something that, maybe it has some extra calories and things, and one day a week, it's okay to cheat a little bit and go over calories by a bit. And so, it's, I'm going to get the salmon instead of the cheeseburger. And I just make a pact with myself and I go, and that's what I end up getting. So that's been huge for me to make better decisions going out, because going out to eat, things might even seem healthy, but a lot of times there's so many added oils and sugars and sweeteners to things that you don't realize that, like, sometimes you go out to eat and your whole daily caloric intake is in that one meal. And that right there could completely ruin your progress for the week. And and then the other big thing was stopping the eating 2 to 3 hours before bed and getting my gut health squared away. Those are the big things. So if you have struggled to lose weight like I have, and your story sounds similar to mine, feel free to reach out, ask questions, leave comments. I'd love to give you my feedback on different things, because again, I want to share my story because I think weight loss is a very complicated topic, yet also can be very simple, because yes, I had all these issues I went through, all these different factors. My big thing out of this was, don't accept the general principles as the absolute. There are exceptions to the law. There always are. And you could potentially be that. So find the medical professionals that can work with you, to hear you, listen to you, really do very high level investigative work in diagnostics to make sure we have the right answer. We're not just throwing things at the wall to see what sticks. And getting your gut health under control and not just throwing band-aided cheap supplements and probiotics and prebiotics at it can really make a big difference to what ends up happening with your own weight loss journey. So again, if you guys have questions or anything like that, feel free to reach out. You can reach me at Brett, B-R-E-T, at barbelltherapyandperformance.com. You can check out our website, barbelltherapy.com. Follow us on Instagram at barbell.therapy. Or if you're into training, you can check out our gym, architectfitness.com. That's ARKITECT fitness.com. Or check out at architectfitness.com, spelled the same way. We also have a dietitian on staff now that we're working with. That's great. Her name is Kelly Igo. If you have any questions about that, feel free to reach out, send us a web inquiry, whatever. And again, if you've gotten anything from this podcast, you enjoyed the episodes, you've learned something from it, you want to hear more from us, please like, rate, subscribe, share, and leave us a review. That would mean the world to me, and we'll continue to help grow this podcast so we can get bigger, better guests on. So that is all for today. I hope you all enjoyed, and take care for now.